Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Spanning the Need. Tonight, we got a very special segment. Well, as you can tell, I have liquor. It's called bourbon. And to speak with us about it is from the Bourbon Trading Company, Matt Snyder, and Shon Christy will be joining us for a little additional tasting a little bit down the road. Thanks for joining us tonight, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Not a problem. Well, let's talk a little bit. Like we'll kind of get into the bourbon itself and everything. So, talk a little bit about, Matt, how you kind of got started in the bourbon industry, kind of what led you up and where you are now.
Yeah, for sure. I've always been interested in bourbon, in particular like brown spirits. Years ago, I was at a tech conference and there was a big following for Scotch at these conferences I was attending. So I was introduced to somebody with a lot of knowledge that had tasting, and it was pretty phenomenal. And for a while after that, I was definitely drinking Scotch for a while, but I still would always fall back on my IPAs, right? This is the beginning of the IPA boom. But then I took a job where they actually had an office across the street from Buffalo Trace. And when I would go down to that office, yeah, it was a little dangerous, right? Some of the other editors of the building, said, "Hey, Matt, we're going to take you over to Buffalo Trace. We're going to take you over to Woodford Reserve, and we're going to show you bourbon." And at the time, I'd had some of both before, but I still was not knowledgeable, right? I didn't have a true appreciation of it. After having going to both these distilleries, I was just blown away. Like, this is just absolutely incredible. I saw distilleries of two different scales, fell in love with it. And for a long time, Woodford Reserve and Eagle Rare is what I would drink all the time. It was phenomenal. And still people ask me, if you could only have one, what would you have? And I'd say, you know what, honestly, I'd probably just go back to Woodford Reserve. It's easy to find. It's on the shelf. It's a reasonable price. I can drink it straight. I can put it on a rock. I can put it in a cocktail. So it's just a versatile bourbon. But to continue the story forward, 2020 has been an interesting year, I think, for everybody.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so much has changed. The way people interact, the time we have available to do things we probably didn't have time to do before because activities we used to do were canceled. I'm a guy who likes to stay busy. So in addition to being a CTO for a healthcare company at the time, also a high school volleyball coach, and somebody who was also at the time actually looking at opening up a barbecue joint with a bourbon room in it, right? Just because I had an appreciation for both. I was teasing both those things out. Well, fortunately, before I signed a lease on a space, the pandemic kind of came around. So I decided not to open the barbecue joint as a side business. And instead decided to kind of focus on bourbon. And the reason why is, as a CTO and a tech leader for the last, 20 years, I've done a lot of work with remote teams virtually across the country, outside the country, but primarily West Coast and East Coast. And so I had a pretty good knack and feel for how people interacted online, what works, what doesn't work, how do you keep people engaged? But it's still really hard to make it meaningful for people. So like everybody else, I started frequenting the liquor stores a little bit more, get an extra case of beer, get an extra bourbon because we had
I think everyone was doing that once the pandemic started. They'd load their I can remember a friend of mine when they started closing down. I don't think she went to the grocery store. I think she went to the liquor store and kind of built up her liquor supply.
Oh yeah. Yeah. If I showed you guys a picture of my bourbon collection at the beginning of 2020 and now, it's like I had to basically do another room in the house for it.
Oh, that'd be good to see. I'd like to see the difference. I bet you your wife loves it.
She doesn't say much. We'll just leave it at that. She smiles and waves. But
she's probably smiling and waving right now.
Yes. But it's been a fun ride. And what I mean is that I leveraged that, virtual, meeting technology with my love of bourbon to find a way to connect with my friends. And in particular, I had a couple in the neighborhood, and we were both kind of going through and doing some blind tastings just to kind of help develop our palate. And what a blind tasting is, it's just literally, pouring some bourbon in some glasses, marking them so you can't see exactly what it is, mixing them up, tasting them, and trying to figure out what's what, exactly what you have in front of you right now, right? Except at the time we were doing it.
And remember, I don't know what these are. So he
Yep.
gave me 3 different ones to try to start, because I don't know if I would have made it to 5. So just so everyone knows, these are all, I don't know what they are. Only Matt does.
Yep. And I can't wait till we get into that. But at the time when I started doing that, I didn't have a fancy board. I didn't have nice glasses. I was using rocks glasses with duct tape on the bottom to mark what was what. And the other thing too is if you look up in Google like bourbon flavor wheel, you'll find all kinds of, broken gifts and stuff online to help you understand what flavors you might be tasting in your bourbon. Well, I don't know if you guys have used your phone and tried to do 2 things at once with it, right? You got an image pulled up, you're looking at it, and you're referencing something else. What ends up happening if you don't keep that screen active, right? It just shuts off. And it got kind of annoying. So I started printing out these wheels, and then with the wheel, you got to spin it around, right? You're constantly turning it around to look at the flavor,
Right,
try to get everything in line. Well, I wasn't coaching because the season got canceled, so I had some more free time. I had a lot of woodworking supplies in the garage and some spare wood, so I decided to invest in a laser engraver and see if I could put a flavor wheel on a board. I like to think I have a creative background, and so I leveraged those skills to kind of come up with the first board. In fact, I have one of the early boards right here to show you guys if you guys are interested. And it's
interesting.
it's a squared off edge. I was using a drill press at the time, so I had to find a way to cover the hole that the drill press left from the Forstner bit. So I laser engraved cork and use that to put in there. And what's great about this board is there's still misspellings on this. So I do really think marshmallow should change its spelling. Yeah.
When you become big, that'll be one of those pictures. This is our first prototype worth millions of dollars.
I call them the marshmallow boards versus the marshmallow boards because that was one of the words that was misspelled on the board. So it's been a real evolution. And what ended up happening is I found that we started doing these things online. I share some samples with my friends, and we go through and do these tastings, that there was a desire for other people to want to do these tastings too. And somebody said, Matt, why don't you start posting some of this stuff on Etsy? I'm like, for real? I'm like, Etsy's like arts and crafts. Like, why would I put a bourbon thing on Etsy?
I would have thought the same way until I started. Until I actually was getting ready to get married. Everyone's like, you got to go to Etsy. I'm like, what is Etsy?
Yeah.
Now we know.
So and it turned out that they were right. I put some of the boards up there. The early version was a little more simplistic, right? It had what I call like a reversed text, right? It still had the cork. It had a rounded off edge. We weren't doing any engraving on the back, right? This is hickory at the time. We were doing more maple, doing more mahogany. We've since evolved to using hickory for a variety of reasons. One, because primarily because everything is truly unique with hickory. I don't know if you guys have seen or how well you know different species of wood, but so for example, this is hickory here, but so is this, right?
Well, and that's a good thing that's a good thing that we talk about the different types of wood that you've used or you've tested on. So it kind of shows what you've kind of your prototype to where we are now, which a little bit ago, I showed everyone the board that, and we'll get into that shortly. And I think that shows you're basically kind of where you've gone in less than a short period of time, because you've probably had plenty of time during the pandemic, and we'll get into a little bit of that here shortly. So I would commend you for just keep adding it.
No, I appreciate that. And it was exciting for me because I actually consulted myself for the first time in my entire career. My entire career, I've been consulting entrepreneurs and startups and businesses on how to basically build software products for to support their business. And I usually consult in a very iterative, fashion. Like, what's the smallest experiment we can do to try to get some win, and then move from there. And I think these boards are kind of the same thing. When I go back and look at the earlier boards, it was a lot more manual, but it was also still kind of an experiment. They were great. They were beautiful. But I think we've really evolved it into something that's even more beautiful, but it's also more repeatable now too. And it scales a lot better.
So let's get into the burb tasting a little bit. So when someone does a bourbon tasting like we're doing here, what do they get when you order it?
So when people buy online, what they're buying is the kit itself. So they're buying the board, they're buying these spade ram glasses, and they're getting with it a tasting sheet, which you have there, right? So you got some
Yeah,
tasting sheet.
I do have that. I do have that. I don't know how good it'll do for me, but
and of course the fun golf pencil. I love these. So note to self: if you need more golf pencils, let me know. It turns out that you need to order a minimum of about 500 of these in order to get an order placed. But
might
the
as well
good
put your
side
name
is,
on them.
yes, I'm almost out of them. So that's a sign of progress, right? If I've gone through 500 golf pencils and done one per order, that's pretty special.
That is so. In just so everyone's aware, Shon Christy is from Shon Christy social media company. He's here to help us taste as well, since he's a bourbon drinker as well. Shon, you can say hi too. Sorry, we haven't forgotten about you yet.
I'm going to stick to what I do best and taste the bourbon.
Well, Shon does more than that. Shon's been a big help too in helping promote this product. Shon gave me the idea to start working with nonprofits. He had engaged with a lot of them, was helping them out with social media and their presence online. And he said, Matt, there's a real need for this in this space. There's a lot of these, nonprofit organizations that depend on their in-person events to raise funds in order to operate.
That's actually a big thing that we'll talk about here shortly after we start tasting. But that's a good thing that we'll dive into here shortly, because of what's been going on in the pandemic. So let's go in and start tasting. I leave it up to you, Matt. So what do we do?
So what we're going to do is I'm going to let you guys know what you guys got in front of you, and we're going to go through and just kind of sample each of them. And that way to give everybody kind of an idea of the variety that's available. And I know we've only got 3 samples here, but it's still enough to kind of show you some of the things that I really want to kind of tease out for each of you.
It's enough to pass me out.
Yes. So in the first glass, we have an Elijah Craig. Now, what's interesting about that Elijah Craig there is that is actually an Ohio Liquor Control store pick, is what we call that, where they've specifically picked out a individual barrel, and it's made its way into one of I'm going to guess around 200 bottles, right? Which is a typical yield for a barrel. And you could pick these up at the Giant Eagle or any local liquor store that's near you. But it's going to be a little bit different than the standard Elijah Craig small batch that you would typically pick off a shelf, right? Okay. So this one is technically going to be a little bit more special, right? Because somebody handpicked this particular one.
Okay. So what is it? It's sniff and taste. Is that how it goes?
Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through this, right? Talk about the color. You can tell a lot by just kind of holding it up, rolling around the glass. These glasses are designed to allow you to absorb the bourbon visually, with your sense of smell as well as sense of taste. So
I think it just cleaned my sinuses up.
So when you do nose the bourbon, is what it's called. We're gonna bury our nose into the glass, but as we do that, we're gonna leave our mouth open. And what happens when we leave our mouth open is it allows the ethanol vapors to actually pass through our nose and out our mouth. If you were to keep your mouth closed, you'd lose some nose hairs on the way through.
I think I already did. I missed that part of the
yeah. So give it a good swirl, agitate it in the glass, right? These glasses help you agitate the bourbon while still not spilling it, right? And then funneling it up into your nose. That's why it's got a thinner, tapered top.
Okay, let's give it a taste, right? Oh, whoa. That one will grow some hair on your back.
So you know what's special about the first taste, Anthony? The first taste is all about numbing your mouth.
Yeah, I just got some water. Hold on.
Yes. Yeah. Oh no, you gotta let it sit. You're gonna ruin the experience. You gotta let it sit a little bit. You gotta let it.
Okay, hold on. Let me get another one.
Anthony's going in hard.
Oh, that one felt stingy on the way down.
So what I want to encourage you to do, Anthony, is I want to encourage you to let that sit a little bit in your mouth. Let it numb, because the next one we're going to do is what's called the Kentucky Chew. And the Kentucky Chew is something that Eddie Russell at Wild Turkey, who's a master distiller and probably one of the biggest names in the industry. This guy's been doing it for 60 plus years, basically creating fantastic, barrels of bourbon. But it's a really aggressive way to get the bourbon to move around inside your mouth so you can taste all the flavor in the bourbon.
Yep.
And if you watch somebody doing this,
I'm not a bourbon drinker, but I can certainly taste the after effect.
Yeah. So I'm going to encourage you to try doing the chew. And what we're going to do is I want you to pretend you're going to take a drink, and I want you to pretend you're eating a piece of steak. And it's
on
a
the
nice
second one?
On the first one still. So on this
I got to go back to the first one. Okay.
Yeah, so let's go back to the first one. We're going to do a Kentucky chew on this one. So take a nice, you're not taking a shot, but I want you to get enough in your mouth that you can basically chomp on it, chew on it, pretend like it's a physical, tough piece of meat, and just move it all around your mouth.
Ooh. Oh, I felt that one. Is it supposed to tingle on the way down?
It's supposed to tingle everywhere. It's supposed to tingle everywhere.
Last time I did a bourbon tasting, I was in Dublin at the Jamestown. Well, no, Jamestown's not really a bourbon.
Yeah, that's a Jamestown
whiskey.
You're talking about
Jameson.
Okay.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Jameson.
Yeah, Jameson. Yeah, that'd be an Irish whiskey.
Irish whiskey. Yeah, that was the last tasting I've done, and that was an adventure.
So what do you think on that first one? What kind of flavors and notes do you get out of the first one there, Anthony and Shon?
Well, good, Shon.
I get like a woody, maybe an oaky.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
More
that's yeah, there should be, on that, you're definitely right. That Elijah Craig definitely has a lot of oakiness in particular that barrel. Other things you'll probably want to notice is your oak and your caramel. And that's where these boards come in handy, right? Is as you notice, like, wow, that's kind of a woody flavor I'm getting out of this. So is it a fresh oak? Is it more of like a sawdust? Is it more like a toasty oak? And then also kind of moving across, like, and some sweet vanilla. So what kind of sweet? What kind of vanilla? Is it more of a brown sugar? Is it a little bit of a chocolate?
It's probably more brown sugar, at least.
Okay. Yeah, and that's just it. And the other thing too is there's no, what's great about this is there's no right or wrong to it. It's meant to be an experience. It's all about, because I'll tell you what, I've had the same bourbons on different nights, and they've tasted completely different to me. And mood has everything to do with it. What I had for dinner that night has everything to do with it. Did I let it sit out? Did I not? Did I have something before it or after? There's just so many variables that come into how you perceive that flavor. And what I tell everybody is, listen, you do what makes you happy when you drink your bourbon. If you put it on the rocks, go put it on the rocks, as long as you enjoy it. Some people I might wince a little bit if you're putting, Pappy Van Winkle on the rocks. But that's you. If that's how you enjoy it, and you've got the money to put Pappy on the rocks, then do it.
So let me ask you this: how many tastings have you done since you've kind of started over the last? I don't know. You've probably been full swing probably by October.
Yeah, we were full swing by October. But what we've found is one of the things that we need to be very careful of is how we partner with making sure we fulfill on a tasting event. Mm-hmm. So, for example, when we work with nonprofits, we typically also line up a distillery. For example, there's one in Atlanta that we work with a lot, and they handle getting the bourbon to everybody virtually. Right. Mm-hmm. And then either I'll run the tasting or their master distiller will run the tasting just based on availability and the date that was picked. Because I don't have a license to distribute alcohol, so I cannot distribute alcohol.
Right. We totally understand.
However, what I do is I do facilitate the event. I facilitate the tastings. In fact, some of my biggest customers are actually other people that run tastings. So a lot of what I do is actually just build the kits. Like I'll put together the boards, the glasses, everything else, and get them out. In fact, that's where we found our real niche to be, is while we do the tastings of those things, is the board. Actually, the boards themselves has been a big part of the business for us. Is creating that.
Good.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, talk a little bit about the board itself, because I showed it earlier, and let me show it again. Kind of talk how it was just like from left to right, because you do have a variety of different vanilla flavors, wood, and some additional stuff on the bottom, kind of going from one side to the other, and how that came about.
Yeah, so we studied all of the flavor wheels that were currently online from all the bourbon experts, right? So we kind of made a best hybrid of everything that was out there, and then kind of added our own twist to some of them. So, for example, you're not going to find pencil shavings on any of the professional wheels. But it was something that, honestly, there was a bourbon that I had tasted early on that reminded me of sitting in a fifth grade class, taking the pencil through the sharpener, right? And that was the smell that hit me. And that's what this is all about, right? Is what does this remind you of, right? Because there's not a one fixed hard taste for bourbon, because it's just more about what it reminds you of. So on the board, it's all about understanding the flavors that can come out of the bourbon based on the char of the barrel. So all bourbon has to go into fresh oak barrels. They have a char of, they call it char levels of 0 to 10. Most will be in that 3 to 7 range. And if you work on the left-hand side of the board, this is more of the lighter chars. We call it the fresh oak. And we start moving into flavors that come out with the toasted oak, more heavily charred, all the way to what we're calling microbiological, which is this is the yeasty, earthy flavors. This is where you get a high char on the barrel, and or it's been aged a very, very long time. So it's taking on a lot of the flavor profiles of the barrel itself, because it sat in there a longer amount of time. So it's going to pick up on those things. So
that's a good, kind of, gives everyone the understanding, like your taste. Like I said, brown sugar. We had a little bit of wood, and we could actually find it underneath on the palate itself.
Right.
And I think that shows you, hey, look, you can look at different types with the wood. That you got spicy, sweet, vanilla, tasty, fruity, noli, and then you can look underneath. You got even one that says earthy. You can eat some leather at the same time.
Yes, yes. And that's what we'll taste one of these other ones we're going to taste here in a minute. You'll notice that leather flavor come through.
Oh boy,
cherry up front, a little bit of leather on the finish. But that's what's kind of exciting about it, is there's a lot of flavors that you can get from bourbon based on how it's been aged, what the mash bill is. Is it a wheated mash bill? Is it a rye mash bill? So the one that we have right now is Elijah Craig. This is a rye mash bill, right? The next one that we have is Larceny, which is a wheated mash bill.
So this is Larceny.
Yeah, and this is a Larceny barrel proof. So this one's going to be really hot for you. So when you do nose it, make sure you have your mouth open, because this is a 100
not bad
23 proof.
Oh,
it does drink lighter than it is. So just fair warning. This is like that party you went to and you didn't think there was anything in that punch, but in fact there was quite a bit in that punch.
We call that jungle juice.
Yes.
Okay, let's see what we got. What is it? Swirl? Mouth
swirl around. Yeah, get a good nose. Breathe in deep. You should notice a lot of different flavors coming out of this prior to the first one. And what's interesting is these are both made at the same distillery. These are both made by Heaven Hill. And so these are two different recipes that Heaven Hill uses.
You can tell it's a lighter, like it's not as strong as the other one, but you can taste it. It's got a taste buds 10 times more.
Yes. And that's what's nice about a barrel proof is it's not cut. So you're getting the juice out of the barrel, straight in the bottle, right into your glass. So as the distiller is getting ready to pick that barrel, you're getting the same profile that they got when they decided to pull that barrel off the rack.
Shon, what was that face?
I'm processing.
Yeah. I like to think of it as a reflective spirit, right? You can choose just to kind of, sit there, sip on it, not think a lot about it, or you can spend a lot of time really diagnosing, what's in your glass, right? And I think there's certain bourbons that inspire that more than others. Again, it's all about what kind of experience are you looking for.
And I think the nice part is you can do this from anywhere in the world, pretty much. You want to do a tasting, you can do it, and because right now, actually, the pandemic has actually helped you grow because everyone's staying home.
Yeah, it's been huge. Everybody's looking for different ways to connect virtually. This has been a great way to do it. We've got a couple other things we're working on right now that we haven't announced yet to actually encourage it even more. And we're actually getting ready.
Come on, make the announcement now. Come on, right
not
now.
Yet, not yet. I gotta wait till I just have the third one, and then I'll get into it.
Okay, well, on the third one, we'll make sure we get you. So we talk a little bit about the tasting, and is there a number? Is there like a limit on how many people you can do in one tasting, or a limit on someone saying, "Hey, I'd like me and 10 of my friends to do a tasting on like a Saturday night at our houses, like this"?
There's no limits, right? The technology supports all of it. In fact, one of the things that we are working on is software to support large tastings. Because what happens in a large tasting is you lose the intimacy that we have right here in this smaller setting, right? When you get into that 5 to 15, that's a real nice number to do a virtual tasting. Everybody's able to interact. You can ask questions back and forth. There's a nice dialogue that happens. When you get above that 15, it gets a little bit tougher. So we actually, what we're building is software that almost gives you a Peloton-like experience, right? You guys, Shon, I believe you have a Peloton. Is that correct?
Correct.
And so when you get to work with a trainer, right?
Often. You can look me up.
Just checking, because I know some people that bought it and it's still sitting in the box it came in.
Well, for those friends of yours, you can tell them that I have friends that'll take it off their hands for a discount.
Yeah, I will pass on the message.
Yeah, but Shon, how would you describe the Peloton experience when you're on there and you're biking, you're going through that workout? Does it feel like you're in a class, or does it feel like you're just kind of watching a video?
No, it definitely feels like you're in a class. You feel connected to the instructor. Very similar to the experience that I had with you. I've hired Matt from a business perspective to work and do this for my clients, and I've been thoroughly impressed. It's not just the class and the instructor. It's the whole environment, from the lighting to the music, and it's how you feel at the end of it, which, the first tasting I did with Matt, I was way more knowledgeable than I was going into it. I appreciated bourbon more, and I actually became a collector after that. And so I probably have about 50 bottles post that event. So Matt, the bug bit me for sure. And Matt's actually heading down to Kentucky to do some things, I think next week or at the end of this week. And I'm like, hey, can you pick up some bottles for me while you're down there? I'll shoot you Venmo. Just tell me what you find. So
now we know why Shon works from home a lot.
The only way to do it, man.
That's not coffee in the mug.
Yeah, that's not coffee in the mug. Hey, I'm on the other side of the state. I'm okay with not asking questions. Let's get into this third one.
All right, so this third one is one of my favorite bottles from 2020. This was actually a random find, speaking of bourbon hunting and collecting, from a family vacation trip down to South Carolina. We went down to Hilton Head, and we hit one of the liquor stores down there, and they had a store pick of Wild Turkey Kentucky Spirit. Now, this was their pick from 2018. What's interesting is the name of the pick was actually Matthew. So I felt like it was destined to be that I had to own this bottle. So I got it, and it's just been the Wild Turkey Kentucky Spirit is something that at the beginning of this year, I would have probably put my nose up in the air at. Like, I just wasn't a fan of Wild Turkey products because I'd had a bad college experience with Wild Turkey. I'm sure a lot of people have. And ever since
I divorced several liquors. Right? I divorced several liquors in college.
Yes. And that's just it. I actually re-engaged Wild Turkey this year, and It's been phenomenal. In fact, I would say I have more Wild Turkey products on my shelf at my bar now than any other distillery, because of the fact that one, a different appreciation, and two, I started kind of getting into the right products that Wild Turkey was producing, and this is one of them. So let's get into this one here. Swirled around. This one has a phenomenal nose. A nice palate on it. Like you'll notice the dried fruit really comes through. A little bit of caramel, orange, some cinnamon, but then on the end you're going to notice that spice kind of come through. You're going to notice a little bit of leather kind of come in, coupled with the oak, and it's just a nice pairing of flavors all the way through.
It's a great.
That one's a stronger. That definitely strong leather. Just definitely that strong leather with the. It doesn't have the kick that the other two did going down. It was actually a lot smoother going down, but still the leather kick to it.
Yeah. Yeah, this is very smooth. And what's interesting about that, right, is you mentioned like that Elijah Craig has a little bit of kick. It's the lowest proof bourbon out of all three of these. The Wild Turkey's in the middle.
Appreciate that.
Larceny's at the highest.
Low.
Yeah. Well, that Larceny's it's a 123, so that'll give you a nice little kick in the butt. But that's just it. I mean, you can find even there's actually a Wild Turkey 13-year Distiller's Edition product that I have. It's a 91 proof bourbon, and it is absolutely phenomenal. Great nose. It actually drinks like it's a higher proof because of just the viscosity. It's thicker, really coats your mouth. There's a lot of flavor. There's a lot going on in it, and it's fantastic.
Right.
So
let me ask you. Let me ask you this. So what happens if someone's not a bourbon drinker? Because we've been concentrating on bourbon. Is there any other types of tastings that you do? Maybe lighter bourbons, or maybe a different set of liquor, or is it just bourbon itself? So
right now we're just staying within the bourbon realm.
Okay.
We do have plans to do tequila and gin. We're working on that right now in the background. So we've had a lot of requests for that variety, so we decided to act on it. But in terms of when I do the bourbon tastings, we usually look at what category the group falls into, right? Are they experienced? Do they have some experience, but they don't really know what they're like? Are they the ones that are just strictly chasing Blantons and where all the hype is at, right? Or are they really just entirely new, know nothing? They've had some other spirits, but don't really know that much about the craft. And for those people, one of the things that I'll almost always put in there is Angel's Envy. Angel's Envy I found is a bourbon that it's finished in sherry cask, so it's got a little more sweetness. The bite is taken off a little bit. It's a 90. I forget what the actual proof is on it, 90 something. So it's something that somebody new to bourbon can get into pretty easily, and even people that have had bourbon a lot tend to like it as well.
What about people that may not like bourbon straight? Like, I'm okay tasting it, but maybe some person, what would you recommend mixing it with? Sprite, Coca-Cola, just to kind of bring it down during tasting?
During tasting, what we do is we actually get the limestone water that they sell down in Kentucky, and it's the same water they use to cut the bourbon with. And so what we do is we'll actually hand out a vial, similar like the vials that you have the bourbon in, that have that water in it, that comes with a dropper. So what we'll encourage them to do is basically cut the bourbon themselves. And what they would do is actually use that dropper, put a drop or two in there, swirl it around, let it sit a little bit, and that helps bring the proofing down. That's
good. So anyone that's even not a taster is able to taste bourbon.
Right. Yep.
Okay. And I know we talked a little bit about. I know you're branching out, and don't worry, everyone. We're not going out. See, I'm empty. We're only going 3 tonight. But normally it's 5. So he goes through a whole additional tastes. Talk a little bit about how you've been helping nonprofits, because I know we talked a little bit about how nonprofits are hurting right now because either events have been canceled, they're doing virtual online. How can you help a nonprofit?
We do virtual events for them, right? We take what they were doing in person and we take it online. And that's something that Shon's been a big part of. He really helps put together some of these events when we work together with them, socialize and market those events. But basically, we actually can attract a bigger audience. So let's say that they were renting a hall previously for 200 people. They're paying a sizable sum for that. So instead of them doing that, we're eliminating that cost. We're moving all the work up front for them. So basically, it's all just, okay, let's get the invitations out. Let's decide on the bourbons, a date. Hey, let's go create a Zoom meeting. That takes 5 minutes, right? But we put together we have a playbook that we have for them to basically run through on what they need to do on their end, how we're supporting them on our side. And then as it leads up to the actual date and they have all their attendees signed up, registered, ready to go, there's not any work for them to do. They're not showing up at the venue, 24 hours ahead of time to make sure it's all prepped, doing last minute stuff, worried about, all the other things that come with an actual physical in-person event, right? In-person events are great, but they're a lot of work. So our virtual events actually take a lot of that stress out of it. So we're doing this all online, where there's a number of ways we coordinate actually getting the kits and the samples to them, whether it's them picking up from the nonprofit's location or, direct ship. There's a lot of different ways we do based on, the size of the event. But we don't have a cap, right? We could put 500 people in this virtual event at no additional cost other than just making sure they all have their kits. Whereas if you were to go up to, go from a venue that supported 200 people to 500 people, now you might not be getting the date you want because the event that holds that many is only available on a certain date. So we totally changed the nature of the event itself in terms of how it's planned and how it's organized. And we enable them to actually draw more people in.
Especially with the pandemic going on right now where charity events aren't happening.
Right.
And I think that's a key niche to help these nonprofits that are having trouble raising money, because everyone goes to the liquor store right now. I mean, I remember I drove down the street on New Year's Eve and it was 6 or 7 o'clock and the line was out the door at the liquor store.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I think this helps.
And one of the things that Matt and I brainstormed on a little bit, and he alluded to it earlier, not only are they having these challenges, right, but this is kind of, event in a box. So he talked about the playbook. Matt has the experience. He's got the product that he can get in the hands of these folks. And the nonprofit is paying based on what they sell. So there's a safety net there for them that I really like. And then we've got a partnership to where I'm helping with driving people to the event to buy these things. And what we found is, people are looking for an experience, number one. And this is something that's really different. In the example of the nonprofit board, Matt showed you kind of a general board, but he also personalizes them for the nonprofit. So now it's like they're getting a takeaway gift that is, something that's a premium takeaway that they're going to keep on their back bar in their kitchen forever with your brand on it, which I absolutely love. I've got one for my company and I've given them to my clients and I've had fantastic feedback on that. And it's different. Everybody's doing some kind of, virtual meeting where there's a meal and there's, speakers or maybe an auction. But I know a lot of the nonprofits that I'm talking to, or maybe it's a virtual walk or run, a lot of that happening when the weather's nice. But a lot of the nonprofit executives that I talk to are looking for something different to capture attention. And I really think Matt has something special here and it's proven successful. So it's definitely something I think that nonprofits could look at as a new way to not only build, the philanthropic side, but also just from the long-term marketing side, having this nice premium product in somebody's house, thinking about them all the time.
Yep. And Matt, you actually, and this is probably a good question, is it doesn't matter where the nonprofit is. The nonprofit can be in Florida, California. You'll still do it wherever you are.
Right.
Because your home base is around the Cleveland area, correct?
Correct.
So I think that especially during the pandemic, we talk about all of what's going on. So that's great that you're doing that for nonprofits because right now a lot of them are hurting.
Yeah, it feels good to help out in 2020. It's just there's a lot of opportunity to do that, I think. And so it just feels good that, not only are we creating a product that people really appreciate, but also one that kind of helps fill a gap and fill a need. Well,
and what's your plan for the future now? I mean, it's probably hard to plan for 2021 and 20. I mean, we're couple months into 2021, and what are you looking for kind of down the road with your business? What are your plans?
Great question. To take over the world, right?
We all wish we could take over the world.
Trust me, I wouldn't want that responsibility, right? But we are very ambitious in 2021. There, in my opinion, is not just a gap for nonprofits still. And even when we are able to go back to in-person events, I still think that this is definitely a need that we can help fill. But we're also looking at it from a B2C standpoint as well. There's a lot of corp that is looking to reach out to their customers connect with them, do virtual events for them, which we've done quite a bit of those as well. And give them basically keepsake items that they're going to remember, that's going to leave an impact on their customer. And it's a lot cheaper than taking them out to the 5-star restaurant and try to impress them, right?
Yeah, that's a good thing.
In addition to that, there's a lot of, I think, opportunity for us to also fill a niche for the person that's looking for a gift for somebody who has everything, right? Or at least, has everything that they're aware of. When it comes to bourbon, I kind of fall into that. Like, nobody's going to buy me a bottle of bourbon because they're not going to have any idea of what to get me. I already have a lot. But if somebody got me this bourbon board, that would be awesome. And so I know that was a big part of our target demographic this year, was people looking for something to give their spouse, a friend who had a lot of bourbon related stuff already, but didn't have a board. It didn't have anything like this. And it's unique. It's high quality. I mean, we have a lifetime warranty on this board because it's a solid piece of wood. It's been well cared for, well treated, and it ends up becoming an heirloom item for that person as well, because it's something they can pass down because it's going to last that long.
Yeah, and that's a good thing. And I appreciate you both coming on tonight. I'm glad you were able to give us a nice selection of bourbon.
Yeah, nice job.
I know I actually appreciate you taking time, and I know that everyone has a busy schedule. Shon, I know you have to go. Matt, at the end of every show, I like to ask 5 questions. So are you up for some interesting questions at the end?
Sure, let's go.
Shon, always a pleasure to see you.
Bye, guys. Thanks for Bourbon Taste with you. It's been a pleasure.
Not a problem. Always, and keep drinking the bourbon. Matt, so here I have 5 hard-hitting questions. They'll probably be the hardest questions you'll probably have, more than what we were talking about earlier. What's your best accomplishment? Personal or professional? Either one. Doesn't matter.
Man, that's a tough one.
I know.
That's a really tough one. I'd have to go with my kids.
Okay.
I like to think that I'm a good dad to my kids. There's something that kind of the center of my life. My wife also, she's a big part of it too. But I like creating things, and I think there's nothing better than basically, crafting and trying to mold, your kids, and not control them, but allow them to, reach their highest potential. It's tough.
Okay.
And I'd like to think I've done a pretty good job of that so far. So that's one of those ones I'm still waiting for the final outcome, right? But so far, I feel like I'm doing pretty good.
What about your best memory?
Oh, wow. I'd have to say camping with my brother when we were growing up. We spent a lot of time at Mogador Reservoir when it was still a campground, riding bikes through the woods, through the trees, jumping into green algae-filled lakes, swimming, fishing, burning sticks in a campfire. I'd say that's probably number one.
Okay. What about your best experience?
Whew. That's another tough one. Wow, you didn't give me much prep on these. I
don't give anyone prep. No one gets, this is how we do it.
I'd have to go with my first trip to Paris when I was in college. I went there for an art history class, spent 2 weeks, and it was the first time I'd really been truly outside of Ohio. I'm a Midwestern Ohio, corn-fed guy. And so actually getting outside the state and experiencing a completely different culture was kind of life-changing. Even though I enjoyed seeing the work and the pride and the craftsmanship that went into everything that makes that city what it is. So it was really interesting to me to see that.
Who's your role model?
Pete Hansen. A lot of people don't know who Pete Hansen is. I was probably watching your podcast, but he was the former, recently retired Ohio State men's volleyball coach. And I've been fortunate over the years to have gotten to know him and interact with him and consider him somebody who I learned a lot from. But just the way that he lives his life, the way that he coached his teams, and just kind of the way that he's just kind of taking on life now that he's retired has always impressed me. And it's something that I'd like to say that, hey, I just want to be more like Pete. I mean, that guy has helped so many people along the way become better coaches, for example, become better players, and just been really a model for what I think a lot of people should strive to be, which is somebody who is always learning and always giving back.
Okay. And then the final one is, if there was one person you'd want to meet, past or present, who would it be and why?
Wow.
That one's always the hard one.
That's a good, there's just such a large range of.
You can give me, yeah, you can give a couple. I mean, like I said, there's no wrong answers.
Yeah. A lot of the ones that are living now, I feel like I've been fortunate enough. In fact, one of them, the pictures right behind me, Karch Karai, another volleyball player, I had the opportunity to meet him and spend time with him. But kind of going outside of that, I'm gonna keep it in the bourbon realm. I'd say I'd love to meet Eddie Russell. This is a guy that's been doing the same thing for 60 years, practicing a craft, honing it the entire time. I'd love to know, what keeps him excited about it, right? They have one mash bill there, basically one recipe for making bourbon, and they've created so many different products from it. And he's had the chance to work with his son on all of this, right? And that's really cool that you're in kind of a family business doing that kind of thing. And I'd love to just kind of sit down and just talk to him about his craft, his passion, and what he's learned along the way. Because I guarantee you that guy's got a lot of things that would be exciting to hear about.
And probably a lot of good stories too.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. I know we got through a lot in a short period of time. I hope everyone enjoyed tonight's bourbon tasting. Matt, if people want to get a hold of you, where do they find you?
BourbonTradingCo.com is our website. You can also email me at matt@BourbonTradingCo.com and respond. You can check out our products online. And also, like I said, we facilitate all kinds of special requests. We love to work with people and help them out. So just let us know what you're looking for, and we can help you out. We will.
Sounds good. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight on Spanning the Need. If you want more information, announcements, or guests, please go to anthonyvspano.com. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night, and God bless.